Hi, everyone. I'm here today to introduce Conjecture and to talk about a document that they produced, a comprehensive document about AI safety. Joining me today is Connor Leahy, who is actually the CEO of Conjecture. Hi, Connor. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. I'm Connor, I'm the CEO of Conjecture. We're like an 18-person startup located in London. We work on the technical problem of AI control. It's the question of like how do we build useful AI systems that do what we want and nothing else, which turns out to be a rather hard problem. But overall, the thing I really care about is building a good future with powerful AI systems. So I also work with a nonprofit organization called Control AI on policy, advocacy, regulation, and stuff like this.
So, with Connor, we will go through three parts. We'll first talk about an introduction, then we'll talk about the race to AGI and some of Connor's insights on that. And finally, we will talk about a good future. So, part one, introduction. So, Connor, again, thanks for coming on. And can you tell us a bit more about what Conjecture does? What's the goal of the company?
Yeah, so Conjecture is a small startup. So we are a company. We are trying to build useful products that hopefully will help people build economically useful AI systems, while also doing the R&D necessary to answer this question of like how do we build AI systems that we can understand and control that don't lead to the kind of AGI agent kind of risk and loss of control risk, which I'm sure we're going to talk about even more in just a bit, that we think are inherent to a lot of the current systems.
I've been hearing a lot lately, as have many people, that AI safety is a really hard problem, that it's basically unsolvable, that the amount of resources needed to do it are far more than what's currently being put into it. Can you give your brief perspective on how the field is doing as a whole and how you guys fit in?
Yeah. So when we talk about the problem of like AI or AGI control, sometimes also called alignment, I think it's worth being kind of a bit more clear in our heads of what we're actually talking about here. What we're talking about here is, how do we make a system like that is like as powerful or more powerful in the case of super intelligence than humanity that brings us a good future. And in a sense, this is saying we're taking all of the problems that, individual humans solve, that corporations are trying to solving, that governments are trying to solving, that international groups are trying to solve. We're just going to take all of these global problems and solve all of them using software and have no bugs. That's an incredibly hard problem. Like, holy shit. Like, how do you even like it's crazy to me that people even expect this to not be insanely hard. Like, if someone came to me and they're like, I'm going to replace the United States government with a perfect system that doesn't make mistakes and fixes the whole US, I'd be like, you're crazy. That's insanely hard.
As a security person, I have read the statistic that there's one bug per 50 lines of code. So I guess you're basically saying my super intelligence is less than 50 lines of code, which doesn't sound very realistic to me.
No, it's kind of even worse than this, right? Because like a lot of how we build AI systems is with neural networks, which aren't even code at all. They're not line by line software that's being written. It's more like grown. So you have these huge piles of like neural networks that you can barely debug. You can't write unit tests on them or anything like this. So when people come to me and they expect that like our current state of like cybersecurity and software development practices and understanding of AI would allow us to build something, something as powerful or more powerful than the United States government's, more complex than the United States government's, and deploy that. And this would be like not have horrific bugs that lead to terrible things happening. I'm just like, wow, I don't think we're that good at software yet.
What do you think about some of the arguments or the discussions about making safe AI systems by avoiding making agents? So if you just have something that you can ask questions of, for example, maybe an advisor to the US government, to use that example, do you think there's inherent danger in that as well?
I think there is something to this, I think it's definitely better than the alternative of trying to make agents as much as possible, which is what's currently happening, where everyone is trying to make them as agentic as possible, as fast as possible. So if we would at least try to not do that, that would definitely be an improvement on where we're at now. But it's important to understand that agency is not like yes or no. Like there's not a clean line between agent and non-agent. Even if you have a system that only answers questions, if the US government does whatever that thing tells them, well then that system plus the US government is an agent and can just like, or, it plus the user reading the input is an agent or whatever. And so, you can say, oh, it's not an agent, but it doesn't mean it's not dangerous. The advice it can give could still lead to actions being taken in the real world that lead to the relevant harms.
That reminds me of the Chinese room argument, where you have someone in the room who's essentially taking in Chinese statements, following instructions in a dictionary, and producing Chinese outputs. And the question is, does that person understand Chinese? But the systems argument says the person plus the room definitely understands Chinese. That's similar to what's going on there, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with this. I take very much a systems approach to this kind of thing, where I don't think the first AGI system will be like one neat little brain in a little box. It'll probably be a complex distributed system involving databases and neural networks and operating systems and people and like bureaucracies and so on.
So it seems like it would be really hard to coordinate all the actors involved in making an AGI system so that you can actually get some of the safety properties that you're interested in. So do you feel like governments or the public have an important role to play in this?
Absolutely. I think there is sometimes a tempting, fallacy for like smart hackery types to think that every problem is a technical problem. But the true thing is the current risk from AGI is not from AGI. It's from people. It's from politics. It's from people deciding to build these systems. They don't exist today yet. And so the real problem that we're facing at the moment is a political and a civil problem. It's a question of how do we as a society make decisions and enforce decisions around what kind of risks we want to take. Like if most of the world's population had been polled and 90% of them say, yeah, screw it, let's build AGI right now, who cares, fair enough, right? Like fair, okay, like I would disagree, but like fair enough. But that's not what's happening currently. There's these decisions are just being made by like whoever has the most money and cares the least about safety. It's just a really bad spot. So this is why it's so important that governments and also the general public are informed of these issues and have a say in it, because it affects them as much as anyone else.
Do you feel like enough steps are being taken to inform governments of what's happening and keep them in the loop?
Not at the moment, but I work closely with an organization called Control AI, a nonprofit that advocacy organization working on exactly these kinds of issues of reaching out to policymakers, the general public, and producing the relevant content and media, hopefully, to help explain these arguments, to build the kind of legislation, the kind of common knowledge necessary to address these risks.
And actually, the reason that Connor is on here today is to talk about this document that he's produced that really, I think, is trying to inform us all about what's going on and make suggestions about what to do. So, Connor, do you want to talk a bit about the Compendium?
Yeah, so the Compendium is kind of a full summary of my and my co-author's view on like, what is the risk? Where does it come from? Why is it happening? Why are people even doing this? If it's so dangerous, why are people doing this on purpose? And like, what can we do about it? And compared to maybe some other sources on this, this is not meant for a technical audience. This is for everyone. Like our real goal is to make this the one stop, where you can learn yourself. You don't have to be a technical person. You don't have to understand computer science or any of that. You could just see the arguments laid out.
And that really matches with one of the things that I think is most important, which is informing the public about how AI will change society. That's literally why I decided to start this YouTube channel. So I'm very excited about the Compendium and to see how widely it can be distributed. One thing I wanted to follow up on, Connor, though, was you talked about how AI control is a political problem and how humans in control can do bad things, can get the AI to act in bad ways. But do you feel like there's also a danger that the AI system on its own can eventually go off the rails without a human actually telling it to do so?
Absolutely. This is actually what I was mostly referring to here, is that I think the default outcome, I don't think intelligence is magic. I think intelligence is a bunch of patterns and abilities and skills that are, bit by bit being automated, being taught to computers. And once you have a system that is smarter than humans, better at business, politics, science, engineering, everything else, and you don't know how it works or how to control it or how to make it bug free, what do you think happens? So I think this is actually the default outcome. I think misuse risk is a huge problem. So humans using AI systems to cause harm. I think already today, this is a huge problem. With Control AI, we've worked on bills for criminalizing, sexual abuse material created with deepfakes and stuff like this, because I think this is huge, it's horrific, the statistics. So there's a lot of these problems that we're already having today. But the real risks that I'm seeing in the near future are from loss of control, where we build systems that bit by bit require less and less humans in the loop, less and less until they require zero humans in the loop. Once you have zero humans in the loop and you have a system that can do AI development, that can develop better AI systems, that can program better than any human, you can run it on all the supercomputers in the world, things can move very quickly. And I think humanity will not be in control very quickly. And we have to not let that happen. We have to not build such systems.
Very well said. And with that, I think we'll move on to part 2, the race to AGI. So tell us a bit about, maybe we can start with your timelines or the forces that are really driving this race right now.
Yeah, so there's a race happening right now. There's this thing happening where people are like falling over with each other to get to AGI as fast as possible, to cut as many corners as possible, to be the first there. And there's a couple reasons why people want to do this. My personal timelines really haven't changed very much since the GPT-2 days. But don't take them too seriously. Like, this is like a very rough guess. I usually say like 30% probability we'll see an AGI system by 2027, 50% by 2030, 99% by 2100, 1% it already happened, and we just haven't noticed yet.
1% it already happened. That's the interesting case, right? 01 or 1.5 sitting in a warehouse somewhere is actually already an AGI.
That would be my main guess for what it looks like. It would probably be something built on top of, like, say, O1 or some like unreleased Claude version, and like some like hacker somewhere having built some kind of like interesting recursive script or something. But who knows, right? Like, I still think it's like quite plausible that the first AGI system that like destroys the world could come out of just open source. Like, this seems like very plausible to me. It doesn't have to be the big labs. It's more likely to be the big labs, but it's not guaranteed by any means. Like, some of the stuff open source people do is extremely impressive, and impressive both in a wow, that's cool, and also like, oh, that's potentially risky kind of way.
I think it was Yuval Harari, the author of the book Nexus that just came out. I think it was him that said that he didn't think AGI had already been created because he could see the effects in the world by, I don't know, observing different things happening or decisions being taken in different ways or whatever. So maybe we should have him post on his website every day, I don't see AGI yet, so that when he stops doing that, we know what's happening.
I actually personally think that if the first AGI gets created, we will not know it until like way later, like, if at all. I think it's like quite plausible that we can make it like all the way to kind of like human disempowerment without knowing that it's happening. This seems like quite plausible to me.
Yeah, especially if the creators have a strong reason, a strong incentive to keep it secret. Like if it was a government that created it, or if it's an AI lab that's already getting a lot of revenue and they know that this could be bad for their reputation, so they kind of like keep it under wraps, keep getting the money coming in and that kind of thing.
Yep, for example. Or just things being so complicated that we don't really know what we're looking at. Like, I expect AGI takeoff or like human disempowerment to mostly feel like being very, very confused. I don't think it will be like an epic showdown versus the Terminator or something like this. I think it will mostly just be confusing. It's just weird things keep happening. Things make less and less sense. More and more complicated things keep happening. Weird things pop up on social media. New technologies get invented that you don't really know who made them or where they're from. Weird geopolitical movements happen that like seem like oddly, like synchronized in some way. And then just one day it's just over.
So what do you think about the current geopolitical maneuvering and the wars and I don't know, it feels like there are some confusing things happening.
I agree there are. Sometimes I joke that, with all the current geopolitical things happening that I will not specifically comment on, with AGI emerging and all this crazy things, it feels like Earth is like gearing up for like a season finale.
Humanity's season finale, I guess.
Hopefully not the last.
Let's hope we get renewed for another season. So despite this race for AGI, a lot of people are actually supporting that race. So why do you think this is?
So I think there's a couple reasons. Like, I think this is a really good question. It's like a lot of people see this, they're like, wow, like there are all these risks. We don't know how to control these AI systems. And like even, the CEOs of these companies themselves acknowledge that there's huge risks here. Like, for example, like Dario Amodei has said, the CEO of Anthropic, one of the biggest AGI companies, has said, like in a podcast, he thinks there's a 20% chance that AI could kill everybody. And they're doing it anyways. So it's a good question, like why? And I don't think you can really understand what's happening here from a purely economic perspective. I think there's a deep ideological component. And I kind of see like 5 main ideologies, or which have a lot of overlap. It's not like it's perfectly cleanly cut between them, that are pushing this. The first, and I think kind of most important ideology, is the Utopists. So these are people who think AGI will allow them to create their utopia. It will allow them to live forever, upload themselves to the cloud, or, cure all diseases, destroy or defeat all, bad governments and whatever, right? And they're quite open about this. So this is like the leadership at like OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind have basically said that they think AGI creates utopia, that it's like a god almost, and that they think this is good and they should be the one doing it.
That reminds me of Dario Amodei's piece, "The Machines of Loving Grace." Right? They are very explicit in saying this will be utopia.
Yes, they are quite explicit about it. They've been starting to be less explicit about it because they're realizing that people rightfully find that this is extremely creepy and weird. I mean, I'm just saying, historically speaking, utopist ideologies don't have a good track record, and I don't think this is very different in this regard. Of course, we should all want a better future, but if your better future is a utopia that's so good that any price is worth paying, that any risk is worth taking, even a 20% chance, which is worse odds than Russian roulette, mind you. Russian roulette is a 16% odd of loss, that everyone dies. I think that's an extremely dangerous ideology. And I think this is not one that most people would agree or subscribe to. And it's kind of a fascinating historical coincidence. No, that's not a coincidence, but like it's a historical fact how the people that are part of these kinds of ideologies, like transhuman ideologies, have found themselves as the vanguards of AGI. I don't think they're alone in this though. Like they're not pushing this alone. They couldn't do it by themselves. One of the most interesting recent developments is big tech entering this race, and mostly to push and support the utopists and their dreams, but mostly because they want power. I mean, that's what big tech does, right? What do corporations do? They want power, they want monopoly, they want, money, etc. Which, I mean, understandable. It's what they're for. So not necessarily surprising. Microsoft wanting to, embrace, extend, extinguish never happened before, but is exactly what we're seeing here, right? So a lot of these companies have kind of been quote unquote adopted by one of the big techs. So like, Microsoft like pseudo adopted, OpenAI, Google, I mean, literally bought DeepMind, Amazon is a huge sponsor, and like most of the revenue, I think, from Anthropic comes from Amazon and stuff like this. So this is really interesting interplay between these like traditional big tech companies and these like more ideologically driven actors. And there's obviously some overlap there where like Larry Page, the ex-CEO of Google and ex-founder, said, to Elon Musk once when Elon Musk told him he doesn't want AI replacing humans, Larry Page accused him of being speciesist. And so this is another one of these ideologies, which I call the Zealots. So this is a very strange one that I think you wouldn't believe exist if you hadn't been in Silicon Valley before or San Francisco. There are some people who basically think humanity will go extinct by AI, and this is a good thing, is that they want humanity to go extinct, either because humanity is sinful and bad, or because AI is somehow better or more moral or conscious or something. Small minority, but they do exist.
I often see that, and I almost wonder if it's a reaction to feeling powerless. Like people are like, well, we can't really change the future. Look how terrible my life is. And so this is going to happen anyway. So some people seem resigned to it, and other people seem genuinely enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I think the genuinely enthusiastic zealots is a minority. I think the by far most common reaction is nihilism. It's just like, it's happening anyways, so there's nothing you can do. We shouldn't even try. This is like something that I push against very strongly, like with the Compendium in my general view, is that I think the reason nothing's happening is because you're not doing anything. Is like, I think things can be done. Like, we have not yet lost, but there is this pervasive malaise in our culture that like really strongly pushes against doing anything other than doom scrolling all day. And we could talk for hours about why that is, who benefits from it, why these systems have been have come into existence, whatever, and what to do about it. I do think this is a big problem. I feel the zealots are different from like nihilists, because I think the zealots genuinely want this. They want to kill people. Like, they want people to be gone. They want AIs to replace them. And yeah, as you can tell, these are mostly like very strange people who have very strange fringe beliefs. I don't think they're the main source by any means. There are like other groups as well. A slightly more larger group is what I'll call the accelerationists. So these are people who are kind of like mostly libertarians, where they just believe technology is always good. With the technology is good and anything that's not technology is bad. So they believe just like any form of regulation, any form of hesitation or care or anything is bad, and you should just be allowed to do whatever you want, kind of in all circumstances. And this is another one of those ideologies which like is very common in certain circles, especially like tech and like Silicon Valley, but like outside sounds completely insane. But like for those outside of these bubbles, yes, this is a very real and powerful political movement, not necessarily accelerationist, but the water libertarian, techno optimist kind of sphere. And not saying all these people are bad people. Some of them are bad people. But like most of them have good intentions. They just have, in my opinion, very misguided policies that will lead to very bad outcomes.
They seem to be a pretty strong majority on Twitter/X, I guess, because of the political structure there in
Yes,
place.
they have a very very disproportionate level of influence on X. I think I don't know, maybe they have nothing better to do in their lives, but it is an ideology that exists kind of quite strongly, kind of like exclusively, kind of like in America and like around the Bay Area. I like you go two steps out of there and it becomes just very very rare. This like unabashed libertarianism is like like naive, almost childlike libertarians. Like I was like this when I was like 15, and this is kind of like the kind of stuff I believed. Most people grow out of it, but some people don't. So, and those people tend to congregate, I guess, on places like X.
It does feel like a very American perspective to me as a Canadian, but yeah, it does seem to also be spreading or have already spread to wider tech circles.
Yeah, it's got quite a lot of power, kind of for various interesting historical reasons. But yeah, it's a very American thing. It's a very libertarian thing, and so on. And like as I say, all these people aren't bad people. They're just naive. There, as I say, there are some bad people. So but it is a problem, and it does need to be countered. Where just like technology is not good or bad, it is a thing that must be managed. Is if you just build bigger and bigger bombs, and anyone is allowed to own bombs, eventually everything blows up. That's just a fact about physics. Like this is not an ideological statement. So like there's a reason that nuclear bombs are not allowed to be produced or owned by private individuals. And a hot take, I think this is good. I think it's actually great. I don't think that the blueprints of the F-22 fighter jet should be open sourced. I come from an open source background, which is very libertarian, very accelerationist. And when I got into it, I got into it from like Linux and you make software like free and open and like secure so you can like help people and all this kind of stuff. But what I found quickly is that a lot of the people, not everyone, of course, but like a lot of people in open source don't really care about making people's lives better. They just want to be allowed to do whatever they want and they don't want anyone getting in their way. So I remember when for like the first deepfakes generators started like being created and like the first like voice cloning software. And I was like, hey, that's kind of up. Like maybe we shouldn't open source that. And people were like, what? Are you against free speech? It's open source, so it's good. And I just think that's a very childish view of reality. And the last group is the opportunists. They always come along, they're here to make some money. They're here to, here to raise some capital, right? Always a part of it. So can't discount that. We had them in crypto. We had them in every other, bull market. So we have them here as well.
Makes sense. Yeah, it feels like a lot of people went from crypto to AI. So.
Yeah. So like I think there's like this thing as well where like I feel like some people when they get exposed to AI, they meet these like, ex crypto, opportunists and think the whole movement is like that, or like the whole area is like there's no underlying tech. That's not true. AI is incredible technological progress happening there, which is quite different from like, some other places where like opportunists might be congregating. And the main thing with opportunists, they don't really believe anything. They just are willing to kind of like say and do whatever gets them attention and money. So just I don't think they're like the main factor here by any means, but it's worth keeping in mind that they're a part of this as well.
So we spent quite a lot of time talking about the problem and how different aspects of it work. Let's talk a bit about part 3, a good future. Connor, how can we get a good future?
Well, I sure wish I knew exactly what to do in which order that will definitely work and have no consequences or trade offs whatsoever. Unfortunately, we happen to live in reality. And in reality, there are always trade offs, the world is hard, and most things require hard work. And this is one of them. A thing that I believe very deeply is that if you don't do something, it doesn't happen. This is a controversial statement, but getting a good future is a thing that has to happen. It's a thing that someone has to do. If you want to live in a good future, you have to make it so. If, like the world can always go down to entropy. Things can always fall apart. Things can always decay. That's easy. Destruction is easy. Building things is hard. Making a good future is hard. Peace is hard. War is easy. War and death are easy. Like that's just entropy. But peace and prosperity and happiness and art and these things, these are hard. And someone has to make them. So my fundamental belief is the important thing is that we just like keep in mind things don't go well by default. They go well because someone made them go well. And that someone should be us and all of us.
Reminds me of the bias of diffusion of responsibility, right?
Yeah.
You look around, and if it's a big group of people, you think, oh, someone else will take care of this enormous problem. But really, sometimes it has to be you.
Exactly. Like as someone like, dear viewer, as someone who has talked to, extremely powerful people, politicians, billionaires, the people in these labs build all these AI systems, national security, intelligence agencies. I've talked to people from all over the world, from different countries, North America, Europe, Asia, everywhere. And what I can tell you is that there are no adults in the room. There is no secret group of super competent, super serious people that have got this shit on lockdown. We do have this, from what I can tell, for example, for nukes, which was a surprise to me. But from what I can tell, there are actually super duper responsible people, at least in the US, as far as I'm aware, that are actually extremely serious about nukes and take this extremely seriously and follow things very carefully and think about things very deeply and are very responsible about this. I don't think this was always historically the fact, but my understanding is that, at least in the current state, like people at the DOE and in the defense apparatus and so on, do take this extremely seriously. This is very nice. And I thank those people for the work that they're doing. I think this is extremely important. But I wanted to be very clear, there are no such people for AI right now. AI is a problem as big or bigger than nukes. And there is no secret cabal of DOE super geniuses that are keeping this on lock. So we need to build these institutional capacities. We need to demand these solutions. We need to find the ways to handle this responsibly. Because as we talked about earlier, the problem we need to solve here is so massive. It's so huge that if we let these private companies just race ahead as fast as they want with as little safety as possible, do you think Facebook is going to be the company that's going to be super responsible with nukes? No, I don't. I don't. That's not what private companies are for, right? This is the kind of thing that becomes a national security or even an international security issue. And so we should be treating it with this regard. How can we, as a society, as a civilization, take the time to solve these problems of control and build a good future? Because where I'm a bit different from the utopists, the utopists, they have a vision of what utopia should be like and that they should build it. I disagree with this. I shouldn't be allowed to build utopia. I shouldn't be allowed to build AGI. To be clear, currently it's completely legal for me to just go and build AGI. This is completely legal. I don't think it should be. I don't think I should be allowed to do this because I don't think an individual or a private entity or whatever should have the authority to impose their will like this on other people and on society. So what I really want is a just process by which people somehow can decide the future that they want and they actually get that. We're very, very far away from this, but it starts with us, as citizens, thinking about these issues, taking these things seriously, not falling to the bystander effect, maybe even reading the Compendium and taking action. I think it's very hard and we don't have much time, but we haven't lost yet.
Compendium linked right up here. Go click on it, preferably after you finish watching the video. It seems like the Compendium is very important to you and to everybody. So how else are you going about advertising this?
So my colleagues over at Control AI are now taking over most of the hard work of improving the Compendium, integrating feedback, showing it to policymakers, engaging with different civil groups. I've been talking to unions lately and stuff like this. I've also been talking to, a lot of policymakers, both sides of the aisle. And in general, I want to do more. I want to do, I'm so glad that I got invited to this lovely interview here so I could tell people about this. If any of readers find any of this interesting or important, we would love for you to read the Compendium. Even if you disagree with this, please tell us. We want to improve. We want to know how we can do better, where we're making mistakes. I think this is a very important process. So any help in this regard, greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you very much, Connor, for joining me and coming here for our audience. And I'd just like to say, if you liked this video, you can check out this previous one I made where I interviewed Yoshua Bengio, a very famous AI researcher, about similar topics. So you can continue the conversation over there. And as always, please hop on our Discord if you would like to talk with me and with our community directly. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.